Dead men tell no tales, except to Harry Keogh, Necroscope, and they tell... It's already... All right, let's try again. Today, I want to talk about Brian Lumley's seminal work, Necroscope. I like this book. It has some goofiness to it, definitely. But I think ultimately it's a pretty decent book. It's a horror series that Brian Lumley wrote. Brian Lumley is kind of known for, was originally known for his sort of like Lovecraftian pastiches, especially like Titus Crow. Titus Crow is kind of like a Sherlock Holmes type character who sort of fights against the eldritch evil type stuff of Lovecraftian horror. Those Titus Crow books, I've not really read very many of them, and I think they're okay. Necroscope is about a boy who can speak to the dead. And I kind of maybe know what you might be thinking. You might be thinking about this.
I see dead people walking around like regular people.
And that's what I thought. And actually, when I first saw that trailer before that movie came out, I thought, oh man, they're going to make Necroscope the movie? No, that is like literally the only comparison between those two. Like the movie and this book have nothing in common. So originally written in 1986, it's very much feels like a Cold War book. And in fact, I would say it's sort of like a spy book, sort of like a James Bondish spy type story with like eldritch evil type stuff. The focus here is a lot stronger on Dracula and vampires. And I think that Lumley does some really interesting stuff, some stuff that I don't know if anybody else had necessarily never done these things before, but I think that Lumley did some really creative stuff with the narrative, and some of this book is really a lot of fun. Some of this book is a little bit eye-rolling to me, but we'll get to that. There's two main characters in this book. There's Harry Keogh, a young British boy who can speak to dead people, and there's Boris Dragazani, a Russian boy who knows the art of necromancy. And necromancy and Necroscope is pretty gruesome. Or maybe I should say it's very unsavory. Boris Dragazani is a member of the E branch in Russia. The E branch is the ESP branch. So psychically or other, sort of supernaturally talented people are in this group, and they're sort of like run Russian intelligence, and they are fighting with the British and the Americans. Obviously, it's a Cold War type sort of setup. There's a British side as well, a British ESP branch. And the story begins with Alec Kyle, who has just sort of come into sort of leading the British E branch after Keenan Gormley has died. And as Alec Kyle goes into his office, or actually to Keenan's office that he sort of inherited, and it goes through the different computer security type stuff to get in there, he's greeted by a ghost that tells him, I have something to tell you, but you need to go get yourself some coffee and smoke a cigarette or whatever. Get whatever it is you need to do, get out of the way, because this is going to take a minute. Which is a very unusual thing for a ghost to tell you. But that's what this ghost tells him. And so he, being a member of the British ESP branch, is like, you know what? This is a little strange, but give me a second. I think I'll be ready. And that's a bit goofy take on it, but it is kind of how it works. It is kind of how he's like, okay. But I mean, admittedly, he is an ESPer and part of this E branch, so he's not too surprised by the supernatural. Not too surprised. It's not exactly clear if who he's talking to really is a ghost. This ghostly figure tells him the story, and that's what he does. He tells this ghostly figure tells Alec Kyle the story of Harry Keogh and of Boris Dragazani. The Russian E branch is run by Gregor Borowitz, who discovered Boris Dragazani, the necromancer. And there's one of the early scenes in the book is sort of like introducing those characters and a sort of like attempted coup that tries to happen in this Russian E branch and its a conclusion. Where Lumley shines is in the action. His action is good. It's fun. It's crazy. Like I said, it's kind of like a dark, like a horror sort of James Bondy type story. I think that's not too. I don't think that's too far off. I think that Lumley himself, who sadly passed away not too long ago, would probably be pretty cool with that comparison. I think that's really the vibe he's going for. Something I really enjoy about Lumley's writing is his bad guys are like lovably bad guys. They're like the bad guys that you want. They're like Bond villains. They really are like Bond villains. Very evil, like just, maniacal laughing. Exactly. I don't know if there's actually any literal maniacal laughing. Maybe there is. It's very possible. Boris Dragazani learned his unusual necromancy technique in his home village in Romania. And he learned it from a strange thing that lives in the ground. Harry Keogh, when we first meet him, is a young boy who is very absent-minded and not really anything very remarkable. He doesn't have many friends, and the friend that he does have sort of points this out, and he says, I don't really care about having friends or not. Strangely, even though he's always distracted, he seems to be able to very easily do his work, his homework. And this really comes to a head when the math, or I guess since we're talking about England, the maths teacher encounters him sitting in a graveyard. And he says, "Oh, did you get your homework done?" He says, "Oh yeah, sure." And he's like, "Okay." He's like, "Well, you didn't even show your work." He goes, "It's not necessary to show my work here." Harry Keogh goes on to tell this math teacher very piercing analysis of the question and how it isn't necessary to do this formula. It's very easy if you just do it like this. And the math teacher's sort of like, wow, that's pretty impressive. He sort of realizes that Harry is sort of like a genius. But he also has a very strange reaction to Harry because his speech and his mannerisms don't seem characteristic of Harry and remind this teacher of someone. Necroscope is part of a larger series that Lumley wrote. I believe that there's 12 books, maybe in total. Although you don't really need to read any more in the first book. Although I think that you probably would want to. If you enjoyed the story, you'd probably want to read it. It does sort of end on I don't want to say exactly a cliffhanger, but it kind of does end on a note where you're sort of like really want more story, assuming that you enjoyed it. And I do remember the sequel, Vampire, being really great. Like I said, it has that sort of James Bond Cold War thing, but another really great comparison is sort of like a very down to earth sort of X-Men vibe. The Russians have a group of X-Men and the British have a group of X-Men, and they're sort of going after each other. And these two characters, Harry Keogh and Boris Dragazani, are sort of like, I guess you could say, like the all-stars. I think in the second book, there's a lot more of these powers and abilities are showcased. A lot of different characters each have this like one little talent or one little thing they can do. That's sort of like this. To me, it feels like a really like really street level X-Men, like very very low power ability that they have, but it is very useful. So now that we're done kind of talking about the narrative, I want to talk a little bit about the writing, because like I said, when Lumley is doing action, it's actually pretty great. And I love his bad guys. In fact, when the camera is on the bad guys, when it's on the villains, you're usually like sucked in. It's like if you were getting up to go to the bathroom, you're kind of like, well, you're like halfway out of the chair, you're like, I'll wait. At least that's for me. That's what it was. It's usually it kind of pulls you back in. I was not as enamored with Harry, surprisingly, who, to me, a lot of times things that Harry said and the way Harry was written about, I really felt like it was a bit of a self-insertion by Lumley. Harry is a writer, and he's sort of like, I don't know, it's not sort of slightly self-deprecating, like, oh, I know I'm so great at this type stuff. It feels like there's that energy. I don't know that Harry ever says that, but there's that sort of that energy that is, to me, a little bit like, okay. Last year, I read Garth Marenghi's Terror Tome. It's a comedic horror novel, sort of poking fun at like Stephen King and Dean Koontz and maybe Clive Barker. And I didn't really, but I missed out on something that this book sort of showed me, is that I think to some extent that book is poking fun at Necroscope too. I really do feel like it, because sometimes the things that Garth Marenghi writes about that are very humorous in Nick Steen's sort of presentation of himself, the way he talks to his female assistant and everything else, that's humorously presented there. Here it's like almost the same sort of tone, or the same sort of things are said, but they're not said jokingly. And so it just sort of really, I was like, I think to some extent maybe that Garth Marenghi is slightly poking fun at Necroscope and Brian Lumley's writing. I want to say so. I mean, this is kind of a popular series. Lumley is not a small writer. This series was very popular. I don't know if it's very popular anymore, but I don't think it would be too hard. It's not too hard to find these books. Although they have redone the covers, and they do not have these amazing covers that are on the original versions. Personally, I think that the original covers, these, great, which are all like skulls and stuff like that and everything, are really wonderful. I really love them. These books, I mean, they're written for adults, supposedly. They're marketed towards adults, but honestly, they're written for boys who are like 14 and 15. That's what I really feel like. Especially because like the tone and like the sense of like the way that Lumley sort of talks about sex and stuff like that and other things absolutely feels a bit juvenile. If you're 16 or 14 or whatever, you would be like, "Oh, this is really cool." And when you're an adult, you're kind of like, "Yeah, it's not bad." This isn't bad. The writing isn't bad. I'm not really this other energy that you've got going on with this and this. It just seems a little silly, a little cheesy. Well, you know what? I'm going to read the back of the book because I think that gives you a good. I kind of wanted to do samples of it, but I don't know that I really need to go through all that. And I don't really want to. I feel like if I go into it too much, I'm like dragging the book through the mud. That's not what I want to do because I think this is a fun series. But I do want to kind of show you, and I think the blurb in the back of the book might go a long way towards maybe showing and not telling, or maybe I'm doing both. Dead men tell no tales, except to Harry Keogh, Necroscope, and what they tell him is horrifying. In the Balkan mountains of Romania, a terrible evil is growing. Long buried in hallowed ground, bound by earth and silver, the master vampire schemes and plots. So, like, yeah, it's not even a spoiler for me to say that the thing in the ground is a vampire. It's like literally all over the book. Like, that's the thing. These books are like, oh, like try to build up this mystery, but it's like it tells you like right out of the gate. Like the whole marketing thing is like, there's a vampire and it's doing this and this and this, and you're like, why are we trapped and unlive, neither dead nor living? Tibor Ferensky, I think I said Ferensky right, hungers for freedom and revenge. The vampire's human tool is Boris Dragazani, part super secret, part super secret Soviet spy agency. Part of it, I'm sorry. The vampire's human tool is Boris Dragazani. This is hard for me. I don't know why. Part of a super secret Soviet spy agency. Dragazani is an avid pupil. There's a little hint right there. The words avid pupil. It's absolutely a Stephen King story, right? A Stephen King story about a young man who discovers a Nazi war criminal, and he like becomes his pupil. That's the. So did I give away the? Anyways. There's a hint to that. To me, that's a nod of it at that book. Dragazani is an avid pupil, eager to plumb the depthless evil of the vampire's mind. Kenzie teaches Dragazani the awful skills of the necromancer. The awful skills of the necromancer gives him the ability to rip secrets from the minds and bodies of the dead. Dragazani works not for Kenzie's freedom, but for world domination. He will rule the world with knowledge. I'm not going to say some naughty word from the dead, okay? You can imagine a verb that I'm not going to really say for some reasons. His only opponent, Harry Keogh, a champion of the dead and the living. To protect Harry, the dead will do anything, even rise from their graves. Necroscope, the first in a powerful new trilogy of terror. The tone of that blurb is the tone of the book. Trying to be edgy, and without actually being edgy. The action that Lumley writes is great. There's a really sort of epic, sort of final scene in this book that I think was really great. I really enjoyed. It's very over the top, and that's where Lumley is great, when he's just going really over the top of the action. And like I said, the bad guys are just horribly bad. Ridiculous little soliloquies and everything, and the dialogue is just kind of, but it's a lot of fun. So if you approach it as a fun horror novel that takes itself maybe a little too seriously, I think that you'll really enjoy Necroscope. I do remember that the sequel to this book, Vampire, is better. I remembered liking it more because it doesn't have all the setup. This book is a lot of setup, I feel like. And also a lot of like, yeah, we know Harry's a Necroscope. Like, oh, Harry's like, oh, I can do this. It's like, you've been a Necroscope. For how freaking long, dude? You didn't know you could do this? It gets a little nuts, especially at the end of the book. Like a whole bunch of stuff gets introduced. You're like, whoa, this book went in some crazy directions. The idea of a Necroscope is kind of cool, and I think that a lot of stuff that Lumley does with his idea, because his vampires are not like regular vampires. They're not They're not traditional vampires like Dracula. I do like this book, and I recommend it cautiously to someone who's interested in this. I don't want to, I have a loving little place of sort of like guilty pleasures, I guess you could say, in my heart, and this book occupies that shelf. Okay. And I like Lumley's stuff there, and I think some of Lumley's short fiction is pretty decent too. He has a good way of sort of making something very memorable images and the kind of like a little bit of gross out, but like not too much, not trying to get into like splatterpunk exactly. Very memorable scenes, like I said, over the top villains, and actually pretty interestingly creative. Sometimes he's a little too much with his good guys, and I think that's the problem. And I had maybe with the Titus Crow stuff that I read is that Titus Crow himself feels a little too competent, and that's where Harry feels just a little too good. And it's just kind of like, oh, of course, yeah, sure, you can do that too. Okay, that's fine. Yeah. And also, one more little thing. I guess this is a slight criticism. Like, Harry's girlfriend is like, it just made me so annoyed. There's a point where Harry like reveals to her that he's a necroscope. He's like, oh, I can like speak to the dead, and they can tell me their secrets. And there's a whole conversation we can have, and there's a whole thing. And she's like, oh, I always thought something was a little different. That's basically what she said. She's like, "Oh, okay. Where do you want to go for dinner?" And that's just, it's just like, what the fuck just happened? What? What? And then also, like, they've been together like a super long time. She's like, "Yeah, I noticed you've been acting a little odd." And I'm like, "You've been with the guy for like 6 or 7 years. You didn't. And why did at that point? Why didn't he ever tell her? Why was it such a secret? I don't know. For plot reasons is why. Oh well." Brian Lumley's Necroscope. I I know I'm poking fun at it, but I poke fun at it because I like it, because it's enjoyable and it's fun, and I think that I want to have fun with the stuff. I like to have fun with things that I like. So I liked it. I enjoyed it. I can't give it a glowing recommendation because of some issues that it has. And again, the Garth Marenghi thing, I just feel like was he getting Necroscope energy out of this? Because I feel like there's a little bit of like Harry Keogh in that book. I would love to find that out. I would love to see if there's an interview. If anybody's seen an interview, and Garth Marenghi is not his real name, and I can't for the life of me remember his actual name. It's just easier for me to say Garth Marenghi. If anybody knows if he's got an interview or anything anywhere, I'd love to hear it or knows more about it. I really love his stuff. I have his sequel to Terror Tome on my shelf over here that I really want to read, Incarcerate, I think. I'm very excited to read it. That is my number one most excited horror read I've got for this year is that book. And I think I'm going to wait. I think it's going to be like I think it's going to be soon. I think it's going to be like a late spring, early summer read. So the first book was so much fun. If you like horror, I'm going to tell you, you're probably going to like that book. You probably are. So appreciative of the genre. It does a great job of poking fun and being entertaining the entire time. And I gotta recommend the audiobook. It was so damn good. Yeah, Garth Marenghi's Dark Place. If you want to see if you like Garth Marenghi's humor, Dark Place, I think is available for free on YouTube. There's like 6 episodes, not for kids. Yeah, I'm pretty sure. I don't know. I think it's edited on YouTube. I'm sure, but way over the top, way ridiculous. Excellent dry humor. Just wonderful, and I just feel like I feel like there's a lineage here that I feel like Garth Marenghi's character owes a little something to Brian Lumley's Harry Keogh. Thank you. My name is Virgil, and this is Literally Books. If you enjoy books, you can subscribe because that's what I talk about. And God damn it, this was a book. That's all I've got for right now. Thank you very much. Bye.